Good you're here. We're covering 4chan posts tonight that are genuinely horrifying, threads that are dark and unrelenting. These stories are real. Hit like, subscribe, sound up, and we'll get into it. I've been a Spanish court interpreter in the federal system for 9 years, and there's one hearing I still don't talk about with anyone I work with. Not because of a rule, because I don't know what to say. November 2020, downtown Miami, the Wilkie D. Ferguson building on North Miami Avenue. Everyone in masks, plexiglass panels bolted onto the witness stand and the counsel tables, court staff wiping down microphones between witnesses. The AC was set too cold, the way federal buildings always are, and my hands were dry from the sanitizer they made you use at the door. The case was fraud, wire fraud, some money laundering counts attached. The defendant was a man in his 50s, quiet, thin, with the kind of posture people have when they've been sleeping on a jail bunk for a while. I won't say his name. His attorney told me before the hearing that he was cooperative and that his Spanish was formal, old country, and that he preferred a slower pace. Fine by me. Formal Spanish is easier. It's the guys mumbling street slang from 3 regions at once that ruin your day. I sat next to him at counsel table. The booth setup wasn't running that day because of the plexiglass rearrangement, so I was doing simultaneous into his ear off a whisper mic and consecutive when he spoke. Standard. The first hour was normal. He answered pedigree questions, confirmed his name, date of birth, that he understood the charges. His voice was low and even. He said "sí, señor" and "no, señor" to the judge like a man who had grown up being polite to authority. I remember thinking he'd be an easy afternoon. Around the second hour, the AUSA started walking him through a series of wire transfers, dates, amounts, account numbers. The defendant answered without hesitation. He didn't check with his attorney. He didn't ask for anything to be repeated. He just gave the answers like he was reading them off a page only he could see. Then the AUSA asked him about a specific meeting in 2018, a hotel in Panama City, who was present, what was discussed. He paused. It was the first pause of the whole hearing, maybe 3 seconds. Then he opened his mouth and started speaking. At first I thought he was doing what a lot of older Latin American men do when they get emotional, which is drop into a regional dialect. I've heard everything from Paraguayan Guarani mixed with Spanish to backcountry Dominican that basically drops half its consonants. My brain went into that mode. Sort out the phonemes, find the root, catch up. But it wasn't that. The sounds were wrong. They had the shape of language. Consonants and vowels in the right kind of order. Stress patterns you'd expect from something Indo-European, but then a click, and then a nasal thing I associate with West African languages, and then a syllable that felt Semitic, guttural, from the back of the throat. It was flowing. He wasn't stumbling. He was speaking it the way you speak your mother tongue. I sat there with my pen hovering. The court reporter kept typing for a second, then stopped and looked at me. The judge looked at me. The AUSA looked at me. "Your Honor," I said. "I need a moment. I'm not recognizing the language the defendant is using." The judge, a woman I'd worked with maybe a dozen times before, leaned forward. "Is it Spanish?" "No, Your Honor. It's not Spanish. I don't know what it is." She turned to the defendant. "Sir, please pause. We need to sort out the interpretation." He didn't pause. He looked at me, just at me. Not at the judge, not at his attorney. And he kept talking. And this is the part I have trouble with. I understood him. Not in the way you understand a language you studied. Not the way I understand Spanish, where my brain does the work and produces English on the other end. It was the opposite of that. The words were arriving already understood, as if he was pouring the meaning directly into me, and the sounds were just a wrapper I didn't need. He was telling me something specific, something about the meeting, about what was actually discussed there, about who was in the room and what one of them had brought in a leather bag and what had been agreed to, and it was clear to me, absolutely clear, in a way that court testimony never is. I was nodding. I caught myself nodding. The judge said my name, twice. The second time louder. I said, "Your Honor, I have to recuse. I'm not fit to interpret this witness." She called a recess. 15 minutes. His attorney walked him out to the holding area, and the defendant did not look back at me. Not then. In the interpreter's room, I sat down with a legal pad and tried to write. I wanted to get one phrase, one word. Anything. I could feel the shape of what he'd said the way you feel a dream in the first minute after waking, all the mass of it still there, and then I put pen to paper and it was gone, not fuzzy, gone, like reaching for a light switch and finding drywall. I wrote down what I could describe, the click, the nasal, the guttural stop, the lilt on the second syllable of what I thought were multi-syllable words. I wrote for maybe 10 minutes and then sat there staring at the pad. Court reconvened with a different interpreter, a woman named Yesenia, who I've known since I started. The defendant, from what I heard later, went back to speaking normal formal Spanish and finished his testimony without incident. Nobody brought up what had happened. The record just showed a recess and a substitution of interpreter, no reason stated. 2 weeks later, I emailed a description of what I'd heard to a professor at FIU who does forensic linguistics, and to a friend of mine who works with endangered language documentation out of a nonprofit in Gainesville. I didn't tell them the context, I just described the sounds, the phoneme inventory, the prosody. Both of them, separately, came back and said the same thing in different words. That combination doesn't exist, not as a natural language, not as a constructed one they'd heard of. The professor asked me, half joking, if I'd been listening to somebody speaking in tongues. I said maybe. Sentencing was in February. I didn't have to be there, but I went anyway, sat in the back in a mask, told myself I wanted closure on the case. The judge gave him 97 months. He said, "Gracias, Your Honor," in his careful old country Spanish, and stood up to be walked out. At the door, before the marshal got him through it, he turned his head, slow. He found me in the gallery like he'd known exactly where I was the whole time. He said one word. It was in that language. I understood it immediately, the way you understand your own name being called, and I have understood it every day since. It has not faded. It is the one word from that afternoon that stayed, and I think it stayed because it was meant for me, and not for the record. I'm not going to write it here. I've never said it to my wife, to Yesenia, to the professor at FIU, to anyone. I don't think saying it would do anything. I just don't want to find out that it would. I moved to Phoenix in March 2022, 3 weeks after signing the divorce papers, and the first person to knock on my door was an 80-year-old woman named Margaret. She was small, with hair the color of old paper, and she was holding a plate of lemon bars wrapped in saran wrap. She said she lived across the hall, apartment 3B, and she'd been in the building for 30 years. She wanted to say hello. I let her in. I don't know why. My mother would have told me not to, but she had that quality some old women have where you feel rude keeping the door on the chain. She sat at my kitchen counter, on the one stool I'd assembled the night before, and she asked me the normal questions. Where I'd come from, what I did for work, if I had family here. I told her Denver. I told her I did billing for a dental group remotely. I told her no. She nodded at everything, like she was filing it. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a stucco building off Camelback, one of those complexes with an inner courtyard and a pool nobody used, palm trees, dust on the balcony railings, a laundry room that smelled like dryer sheets and something older. Margaret told me the AC on my side of the building was original, and it would fail in July. She was right about that too, though I didn't know it yet. She stayed about 40 minutes. Before she left, she said, "You come knock if you need anything, honey. I don't sleep much." I liked her. I remember I told my sister on the phone that night that I'd met a nice old lady, and it made the move feel less lonely. The second time was 2 weeks later. I was carrying a laundry basket down the hall, and she opened her door before I got to the elevator. She said she'd been meaning to catch me. She had made too much coffee. Would I come sit for a minute? Her apartment was the same layout as mine, but reversed and full of things. Not cluttered, exactly. Ordered. Framed photos on every wall. A bookcase of Reader's Digest condensed books. A green couch under plastic. It smelled like coffee and something floral I couldn't place. She poured for both of us. Then she started to talk. She told me about 3A, the man next to me. He was a nurse at Banner and his boyfriend had moved out in January. There'd been shouting one night, she said, but he was a sweet boy. She told me about the family in 2C, 3 kids, and a mother who worked nights, and the father had left for Tucson and never sent anything. She told me who drank. She told me which unit had a woman who used to dance in Vegas, and which unit had a man who cried in the parking lot after his wife's chemo appointments. She told me about a couple on the 1st floor who fought loud enough that the manager had come twice, and about the retired teacher in 4D who fed the feral cats behind the dumpster even though there was a fine. She wasn't gossiping. That's what threw me. There was no meanness in her voice. She said all of it the way you'd read from a ledger, just the facts of who lived here. I sat with my coffee going cold and listened. Halfway through, I started to feel something I couldn't name. It wasn't fear. It was closer to the feeling you get when you realize you're being photographed from across a room. She had lived in this building for 30 years. She had watched people move in, get divorced, remarry, die, leave. She knew what floor the ambulance had come to and which month. She knew the maiden name of the manager's wife. And she had watched me carry my laundry down the hall for 2 weeks. I don't remember the rest of what she said. I remember nodding a lot. I remember the plastic on the couch making a sound every time I shifted my weight. I remember thinking about my ex-husband and the fights we'd had that I thought had been private, and wondering how many of them our old neighbors could have quoted back to us. I walked back across the hall. My laundry was still in the basket by the elevator. I'd forgotten it. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was scared of her, because I kept doing the math. I was 38. If I stayed in this building, and if she lived to 90, she'd have another decade of me. Every UPS delivery, every night I came home late, every time a man's car was in my visitor spot in the morning, she would know all of it, and one day she'd sit at her kitchen counter with the next new tenant, and she'd pour coffee, and she'd tell them about me. I lay there thinking about what she would say. The next time I saw her was in the mailroom. I asked her, without really planning to, "What are you going to tell people about me?" She stopped, with her hand on the little brass door of her mailbox. She turned and looked at me for a long second. Then she said, "About you, I'll say good things. You make the right impression." She said it seriously, not warmly, like a verdict. I took it as a promise. I don't know what else to call it. I decided in the elevator on the way back up that I was going to keep it true. I want to be clear about what that meant. It wasn't a whole personality shift. It was small stuff. I stopped propping the security door open when I was carrying groceries in. I brought the recycling down instead of leaving the bin outside my door overnight. When the guy in 3A asked me to sign for a package, I said yes every time. When my sister visited and we drank wine on the balcony, I noticed I was watching my own volume, and I noticed I was okay with that. 2 years went by like that. I got a raise. I started dating a man from work. Margaret and I said hello in the hallway. Sometimes she'd tell me about her grandson in Michigan. She never came back to the coffee thing. Neither did I. She died in May 2024. Heart in her sleep. The manager taped a printed notice by the mailboxes. The service was at a chapel in Sunny Slope. I almost didn't go, and then I did. It was a small room, folding chairs, maybe 30 people. Her grandson spoke, and then a woman with white hair got up and said she'd been Margaret's friend for 40 years. She told a story about Margaret at a church potluck in the 90s, and then she said something I've thought about ever since. She said Margaret had a rule. Margaret had told her once when they were younger that she'd decided a long time ago she was only ever going to tell the good stories about people, not because people didn't do bad things, because she'd figured out that the story was the part that stayed after the person was gone, and she wanted to be careful with that. The friend laughed a little and said, "She could have written a book on this building, and every chapter would have been kind." I sat in that folding chair, and I felt the coffee and plastic couch afternoon come back to me the way old smells do. She had never been going to say anything bad about me. She wasn't ever going to say anything bad about anyone. She had known that the first time she knocked on my door with the lemon bars, and she had known it in the mailroom when she looked at me and said good things and let me carry that home like it was something I'd earned. I drove back to the apartment. The AC in my car was going, and the palms on Camelback were doing that thing where they look black against the sky right before sunset. I thought about the 2 years of small choices, the door I didn't prop, the volume on the balcony, the man I let stay over, and the one I didn't. I didn't feel tricked. I felt something closer to grateful, and under that, something quieter I'm not going to try to name. She hadn't been watching to judge me. She'd been watching the way you watch a garden, and I'd spent 2 years pulling weeds I didn't have to pull, for a woman who was going to describe the flowers either way. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. Dispatch had 3 separate residents on Grandview Avenue calling about the same smell. That's already unusual. Usually you get 1 nervous caller who left the oven on. 3 means something is actually leaking. I grabbed my kit and pulled out of the yard on the south side, 12 minutes to the block. The truck's heater was still catching up when I turned onto Grandview. You could smell it before you rolled the window down. Not the sharp kitchen smell people describe. It was the version that has been sitting in cold air for a while, thicker, almost sweet at the back of the throat. That already told me something. Fresh mercaptan hits you hard and then fades. This was layered, meaning it had been building. I parked at the corner and got out with the CGI detector on. The reading spiked immediately, not deep in the red, but well above what you want on an open street at 3 in the morning. It was maybe 32 degrees out, and my breath was hanging in front of my face. A woman in a bathrobe was standing on her porch 2 houses down, arms crossed against the cold. She waved me over. She said her husband had been complaining about a headache for 2 days, and she thought he was faking it to skip work. Then their cat wouldn't come out from under the couch tonight. That's when she called. I told her to go back inside, open the back windows, and keep the front door shut until I said otherwise. She started to argue. I said it twice, calmer the second time, and she went. The reading was strongest in the middle of the block, big 4-story brick building, one of those older places converted into apartments back in the 80s. 27 units, according to the plate by the front door. Most of the windows were dark. A few had TVs still glowing behind curtains. I called it in. Told the dispatcher I needed the utility shutoff crew and probably the fire department, and to get them rolling before I even confirmed the source. If I was wrong, they could turn around. If I was right, I didn't want to wait on the phone. The super's number was on a sticker inside the vestibule. He picked up on the 4th ring, sounding half asleep. His name was Ray. He lived on the 1st floor. I told him what was going on and asked him to meet me at the basement door. He said give him 2 minutes. While I waited, I did another sweep along the foundation. The needle climbed steadily as I moved toward the northwest corner. That's where the service line came in from the street. Standard setup for a building that age. Ray came out in sweatpants and a Steelers hoodie, holding a ring of keys that must have weighed a pound. He unlocked the basement door, and I asked him to stay in the doorway. No lights until I said, no phones, nothing that could throw a spark. The basement was the kind you'd expect. Low ceiling, exposed brick, storage cages for each unit, laundry room in the back. There was a dehumidifier running somewhere behind the boxes, that low hum you tune out after 5 seconds. The smell down there was bad. My detector went into full alarm before I'd taken 10 steps. I motioned Ray back up the stairs and told him to start knocking on doors on the 1st floor. Quiet, no yelling fire, just tell people to get out. The main line ran along the east wall, then jogged behind the boiler. I had my flashlight low and my breathing shallow. Not because it would help much, just habit. The damage was behind the boiler, where nobody in their right mind would look during a casual walkthrough. Someone would have to squat down and shine a light between the boiler housing and the wall to see it at all. I saw it and stopped moving for a second. It wasn't a crack. It wasn't corrosion. Old iron pipe rusts out in a specific way. It flakes, it weeps, you get that reddish crust building up around a weak spot. This wasn't that. There was a hole in the pipe about the size of a nickel. The edges were clean. Someone had drilled it, and then, and this is what stuck with me, they had rubbed something dark and greasy around the hole. Boiler grime, probably scraped off the side of the tank. So if anyone did look, at a glance, it would read as an old wet spot, something that had always been there. I looked at it for probably a full minute before I moved. I stood up slow, kept my light on it. My hands were steady, but I was aware of them, if that makes sense. Above me was 3.5 floors of people asleep in their beds. I got upstairs and told Ray to forget the polite knocking. Bang on every door. Get everybody in the hallway and out onto the sidewalk in whatever they were wearing. He didn't ask why. I think he saw my face and decided the questions could come later. The fire trucks were already turning up the block. I gave the lieutenant the short version and pointed him at the shutoff on the street. Within 4 minutes, they were killing the service line at the curb. People came out of that building in a way I've seen before, but never at that scale. Slippers, no coats, kids being carried by parents still half-dressed, a guy with an oxygen tank on a little cart, an older couple, the wife pulling her husband by the sleeve because he kept trying to go back for something, a teenager in pajama pants and 1 sock. A little kid, maybe 5, was carrying a stuffed dog and asking his mom what the smell was. She kept saying, "Just breathe the fresh air, honey." They all stood on the far sidewalk while the firefighters ventilated the building floor by floor. Nobody was hurt. Nobody had lit a stove. Nobody had flicked a bad light switch in a hallway. The math of that still bothers me a little. The detective who caught the case showed up around 6 in the morning when the sun was coming up gray behind the roofline. He asked me to walk him through what I'd seen. When I got to the drilled hole, he stopped taking notes for a second and just looked at me. They pulled the section of pipe out later that morning. I stayed for that part because I wanted to see it in the light. Under the flashlight in the basement, it looked deliberate. In daylight, on a tarp on the sidewalk, it was worse. You could see the tooling marks around the edge. Someone had used a small bit and taken their time. It took them a few weeks to run down who had access to the basement over the years. Keys had been changed once, back in 2019. Before that, one person had a full ring for almost a decade. The former building manager, fired after a long fight with the Tenants Association over back rent he'd been pocketing. He'd walked out of a meeting swearing at people 2 years earlier. He still lived 20 minutes away. They found tools in his garage that matched the marks. He didn't say much when they brought him in, from what I heard later. He'd planned it a long time. Executed it quiet. Waited. I finished my shift that morning and went home and slept until 3 in the afternoon. My wife asked how the night was, and I said busy. I didn't get into the details until a week later. I don't think about it as anything heroic. I got a call, I found what I was there to find, and the people upstairs walked out on their own feet. That's the job. 27 apartments, every one of them empty and standing when the sun came up. The car came off the highway around 3 in the morning, and the first weird thing was how slow it was going. Not slow in a nervous way, not the way drunks drive when they see the lights and try to look normal. Slow like someone was easing into a parking spot at a grocery store, maybe 15 miles an hour, straight down the middle of the lane, no drift at all. I was working the north booth that night. It was a small commercial checkpoint off a state highway in West Texas, the kind most people don't even know exists. We mostly checked trucks, agricultural stuff, occasionally somebody hauling equipment across the line. Passenger cars at 3 a.m. were not common. On a Tuesday in November in 2020, with everyone still weird about being outside, they were basically zero. Ray was in the south booth, about 40 feet from me. He'd been my coworker for almost 2 years by then. Older guy, ex-military, drank coffee out of a giant thermos his daughter got him. When the car started rolling up, I heard him whistle low through his teeth over the radio. "You seeing this?" "Yeah." "He's not stopping fast enough." "He's stopping." The car did stop, right at the line. A dark blue Ford Taurus, maybe a 2015, clean, but not new. Texas plates, headlights on low, engine running smooth. I could hear it clearly because there was nothing else out there. No wind, no other cars, just the hum of the sodium lights overhead and the ticking of the Ford's engine. I waited for the window to come down. It didn't. I keyed my mic. "Sir, can you roll down the window, please?" Nothing. Ray stepped out of his booth. I saw him do it out of the corner of my eye, hand near his hip, not on the weapon, but close. We didn't have real reason to think it was anything yet. Guy could have been asleep. Guy could have had a stroke. It happens. I came out too, flashlight in my offhand. Walked up to the driver's side. Ray was coming around the back, watching the rear windows. The driver's seat was empty. I want you to understand what that means. At a checkpoint. At 3 in the morning. A car doesn't drive itself up to a booth in 2020. Teslas were still a rare sight out there. This wasn't a Tesla, this was a normal sedan, and the driver's seat had a slight dip in the cushion, like someone had just gotten out of it, but there was nobody in the car, engine still running, gear in park. Parking breakup. Everything a person would do if they'd stopped on purpose and then stepped away for a second. I shone my flashlight through the glass. Ray was on the passenger side, doing the same. "Empty," he said. "Yeah." "All the way empty?" "Back seat's not." On the back seat, on the driver's side, there was a suitcase, a dark gray hardshell, standard carry-on size, sitting flat. Next to it, on the passenger side of the back seat, was a bouquet of flowers, pink and white, wrapped in that clear cellophane you get at a supermarket. The kind with a little card slot. I couldn't see if there was a card. The flowers were fresh. That was the part that stuck with me. Not wilted, not sad, like someone had picked them up an hour ago. On the dashboard, laid out neat, was a driver's license, a registration card, and a proof of insurance. Not stuffed in the visor, not shoved in the glove box, placed, squared to the edge of the dash, like a job application on a desk. I looked at Ray over the roof of the car. He was already reaching for his radio. The name on the license was a man from Amarillo. I'm not going to say the name. I remember it. I remember the birth date too, and the picture, because the picture was of a normal-looking guy, in his 40s, dark hair, tired eyes, the kind of face you forget 5 minutes after you see it. He didn't look dangerous, he looked like somebody's uncle. We ran the plate. Plate came back to the same name, same address. No warrants, no flags, nothing. Insurance current, registration current. The car had passed inspection 2 months earlier. Everything checked out except for the part where nobody was driving it. Ray said, "Did you see it come up the road?" "I saw the headlights turn off the highway." "But you didn't see the driver." "I saw a car with its lights on. I didn't see through the windshield until it stopped, did you?" He thought about it for longer than I wanted him to. "No," he said finally. "I don't think I did." We called it in. Supervisor came out from the main office, took one look, called the sheriff. Sheriff called Highway Patrol. Highway Patrol brought a K9. The dog didn't do anything with the car, just sniffed around the tires and looked bored. Nobody wanted to open the suitcase. We waited for a bomb tech from El Paso, which took almost 4 hours. By the time he got there, it was full daylight, and the whole thing felt stupid, standing around a parked Taurus with its engine still idling because nobody wanted to be the guy who turned the key. The tech opened the suitcase. Clothes, 2 shirts, a pair of jeans, socks, underwear, all folded, a toiletry bag, a small box with a bracelet in it, wrapped in tissue paper. The bracelet had a little tag on it. I didn't read the tag, but the tech did, and later he told me it just had a woman's name and the word happy written by hand. No blood in the car, no damage, no signs of anything. They took the car, they took the suitcase, they took the flowers, real careful, into a paper evidence bag. They talked to me and Ray separately for about 2 hours each. I told the same story I'm telling you. Ray told the same story. The dash cam on my booth showed the car pulling up exactly the way I described. The angle on Ray's booth showed the driver's side of the car as it approached. You couldn't see through the tinted upper part of the windshield on that footage. Below the tint, you could see the steering wheel, you could see the dashboard, you couldn't see anybody sitting there. They found the guy 2 days later. He was in a hospital in Oklahoma. Not just Oklahoma, not close. about 300 kilometers from our checkpoint, in a town he had no reason to be in. He'd been admitted the previous morning, brought in by paramedics after somebody called about a man collapsed behind a gas station. Medical coma, no ID on him. It took them a day and a half to match him through prints because his wallet was gone. Nobody could explain how his car got to us. 300 kilometers. Wrong direction from where he was found. Interstate the whole way, cameras at plenty of the on-ramps. Highway patrol pulled footage from 6 different points. They watched hours of it. They saw his car go past every one of those cameras between midnight and 2 in the morning. They could not, on any of that footage, see a driver. I heard that from a state trooper who worked the case, over a beer, months later. He shouldn't have told me. He was pretty drunk. He said they went frame by frame on the clearest camera, the one at a way station, and there was just nobody in the seat. He said his sergeant told him to stop looking at it. The guy woke up about a week after we found the car. I know because his sister called the checkpoint to thank us, of all things. She said her brother was awake, that he was confused, that the doctor said he'd be okay. She asked if we still had the flowers. We didn't. They'd been given to the family already. That was the other thing. The flowers were for his wife. Her birthday was the day after the car showed up at our booth. The suitcase had the bracelet in it, the one with her name on the tag. The sister said thank you for keeping them nice. She said her brother couldn't remember driving anywhere. He remembered picking up the flowers at a shop in Amarillo. He remembered putting them in the back seat. He remembered getting in the car. After that, nothing. I worked that booth for another year and a half. Ray retired the following spring. We didn't really talk about it. Once, at his going away thing, he said, "You know what bothered me most?" I said no. He said, "The license was on the dash, facing up, facing the windshield, like it was showing itself to me before I even asked. I hadn't thought about it that way. He was right. That's how it was placed, not for the driver to see, for us." And so we fade back toward the light, dragging the darkness with us. I'm grateful you followed me all the way down. Which narrative got you the worst? Tell the comments below. The vault's infinite, always more to uncover. Don't let your guard slip. I'll see you soon.